All right, we'll get going. This is Adam Dealan-de podcast, and I am Adam Dealan-de, and I have sort of a change of pace from the other podcast. This podcast, I'm just doing a lot of people that I'm interested in that follows my interest. So it's a broad interest from people that are into ecstatic dance or spirituality or politics and activism. This is sort of my first interview that's on the activist politics side. So I hope you enjoy. I've got with me Kim Dobson. He is a 21-year host of Parallel University out of KAOS Radio at Evergreen State College. Longtime activist in our community, major part of the local branch of the Bernie Sanders campaign when he was running, and you were the I forget the title that you gave me, the chair.
I was a representative to the local precinct, the county convention, the 10th district representative, and the state convention. So I went through all of those different conventions to get to the state convention.
Excellent. And then you also were a major part of the local Democratic Party. You were the part of the campaign committee, I believe it was.
Campaign services interview
Yes.
team. It was a team of about 6 people that kind of a rotating crew out of the electorate. There's approximately 100, maybe 120 people that show up to the meetings, the monthly meetings.
Okay.
And there are actually 281 precinct committee officers.
Oh, wow.
And I am one of those. Not all the seats are filled for all the districts, though. So there's probably 100 precincts that don't have precinct committee officers in the county. Some of them are just too rural to maintain a precinct committee officer. There's no activity. So
but I thought I'd have you on because I admire the work you've been doing for all this time. You're very consistent, very active, or maybe I don't know how active you'd say you are, but you're very consistent and very much a part of local politics, and you have your eye on global politics as well. I thought I'd start us off with some in the news lately. Big things are happening. Is that Germany is sending tanks over to Ukraine, U.S. as well, and the World Economic Forum just ended, and a lot of leaders or a lot of political people are stating that that if we want peace, we have to arm Ukraine. The foreign minister of Canada just said that. She just said that if we really want peace in Ukraine, we've got to send arms. We've got to help Ukraine, support Ukraine, in pushing Russia out of the Ukraine. I thought we'd start with that. What's your response to that?
my response is the same as a lot of people that are asking for peace negotiations. It's very Orwellian to say that war is peace, because that was one of the slogans of the kind of imaginary world of 1984 and A Brave New World and similar books where the love is hate, hate is love.
Yeah.
Just all of these seemingly opposite ironic statements, which they're meant to confuse the populace. It's PR for the war machine, basically, for the military industrial complex to rally around all the weapons of destruction and claim that strength is working towards peace. Well, I would say that it is not at all, and that negotiations are made by secretaries of state, ambassadors, and committees studying peaceful, like the Minsk Accords, which were suggested after after Russia took over Crimea. The Minsk Accords were formed, and there was a whole bunch of points that were made, negotiations which some in the Ukrainian government were willing to go along with, and the nationalists were dead set against it because it meant they gave up some of their autonomy in the eastern region of Ukraine, which is the Donbass. And the Donbass is where all the major fighting is going on. It's also where most of the Russian-speaking Ukrainians are. And the war actually started in 2014 with a presidential coup, which was fomented behind the scenes by the U.S. State Department to get rid of a Russian-friendly president. So they've gone through like 2 presidents, and now we're up to the 3rd, which is Zelensky. So this war has been raging along the eastern edge of Russia in the Donetsk or Donbass region for 14 years. And the news media doesn't want you to know that. They want you to think that Putin invaded suddenly without warning and for no reason. And the reasoning is because ultra-nationalists, the Azov battalion, the neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian military were dead set against Russian-speaking Ukrainians from joining in a group that was working towards an autonomous zone where their kids could be taught Russian in their schools and not. There was interference going on in the Russian-speaking areas of the Ukraine. The nationalists would come in and make, they'd have their minders and make sure that the kids all spoke Ukrainian and they were taught Ukrainian, and that Russian wasn't spoken in the schools. So there was a lot of heavy-handed kind of micromanaging of the school districts and the use of Russian language in the Donetsk, much to the dismay of people that grew up speaking Russian there. So it was considered to be a national, a ethnic affront to the Russian-speaking Ukrainians, and they started talking about seceding from the mainland of Ukraine and becoming an independent state. Of course, that caused missiles to be tossed by the nationalists, and these missiles were coming from American sources via NATO the last 14 years. So that's how this all started. Mm-hmm. There was several thousand Russian-speaking Ukrainians killed by these missiles that were supplied by NATO. And so Putin finally said, well, we're putting down the gauntlet here, and we're going to drive the nationalists out of the eastern edge of Ukraine and allow the Russian-speaking people to decide what they want. So this is the scene that's been set, and the U.S. News media refuses to talk about the backstory of all of this.
Yeah, and the story that's mostly pushed is, well, Putin's just power hungry and he's out to start a new USSR, and if we don't stop him here, he's going to go to Poland. That's one narrative. Another narrative as well, Zelensky's Jewish, so how can they be Nazis running things, or how can they be these nationalists? And Israel supports Ukraine, so how's that really true?
Yeah, well, Zelensky has received probably hundreds of death threats from the nationalists if he even considers allowing the Donbass to be autonomous from the rest of Ukraine. So this is why the war goes on, is because we really have a president that's not able to govern. He's more or less held captive by the nationalists, who want this war to go on until the Donbass is reclaimed, and they want to go as far as reclaiming Crimea now. So, and that's a red line for the Russians. So the U.S. also knows this, and the Russians in Crimea, or the Ukrainians that were in Crimea they are all Russian speaking too. So the Black Sea naval base for the Russian army and is there in Crimea. So this is a strategic object that the Russians are not going to let the Ukrainians have. And it's pushing us towards a nuclear confrontation now with the introduction of Leopard tanks from Germany and from Poland.
Yeah,
The U.S. is sending Bradley fighting vehicles and Abrams tanks as well. So they're upping the ante. They're pushing. It's a game of chicken with nuclear powered. We have 5,000 nuclear weapons. The Russians have about that many.
Mhm.
And if somebody starts dropping nuclear weapons, this planet is toast.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these weapons are, they call them, tactical weapons, but they're the size of Hiroshima bombs. They're enough to destroy Kiev with just one bomb. So, and the fallout from the blast will cover the grain growing regions of Russia and Ukraine, poisoning all of the wheat and oats and millet and barley, poisoning the ground for hundreds of years. So, and this is just not wise thinking on the part of the U.S. military and our Secretary of State. They need to be looking at negotiations with Mr. Lavrov, the Secretary of State for Russia, and we need to have calm voices and some measure of what the Minsk Accords were offering.
And it doesn't seem like there. I mean, the calls for peace or negotiations is really there. I mean, there's nobody in the Democratic side that's calling for that. There are some Republicans seem to be calling for that, but I don't know how. There's not a anti-war movement so much. I mean, there's pieces of it starting to assemble. It seems like I know there's a rally in DC supposed to be coming up with Code Pink and others, but what do you see happening? So, I guess.
Well, I don't see any hope as long as we have the major news media, CNN and NBC, MSNBC, Fox News, and all the others. Even NPR are beating the drums for war. They have picked the side of the argument that says we have to defend the Ukrainians and give them all the weapons they want. Well, this can only go so far because the Russians still have many more weapons they haven't even used. They've actually been showing restraint through this war. They could have knocked out all the big cities, and with just some of their giant bombs, they have conventional bombs that can destroy whole cities too as well. So they've been holding off on their biggest weapons, and I have a feeling that people have said in Congress. I think the senator from South Carolina, can't remember his name, but he said, "Well, we're gonna fight to the last Ukrainian." That's what they're going to do. I mean, the Ukrainians are so intent on winning this war that they're going to fight to the last soldier. So, unfortunately, a lot of civilians get killed inadvertently when you're in the midst of a war. There's nothing precision about a large bomb.
Yeah, and it's trauma that lasts for generations. We're creating generational trauma right now in these areas. These people.
It's true. It's horrible, and I know I'm not making excuses for Putin. I think that he is like equally as crazy. So everybody says that he's just like Hitler and all of this. Well, not so much. I mean, he was got on the nationalistic side of this because of the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine he felt were being oppressed, and he was just tired of civilians being killed there by NATO bombs in the last 14 years. And
Well, and
I'm not going to make any excuses. I mean,
yeah,
they all could have come to the table with the Minsk Accords long ago and prevented this war. There was many opportunities. It's just that when you think about the behind the scenes story in the United States is we've already given the Ukrainians, over $100 billion worth of weapons, and our military budget is almost a trillion right now this year. So that's besides the 100 billion we gave to the Ukrainians. And we have a budget deficit where the budget hawks in Congress don't even look at the military budget. They just say, oh, well, we've got to cut social services instead. We've got to cut the interest payments to the billions we've borrowed from Social Security. So the interest payments alone are huge to what the federal government has borrowed from, our national health care plan for the elderly. So this is clearly a lot of people in Congress are listening to the military industrial complex, when in fact, Raytheon, one of the largest contractors, and General Dynamics, Boeing, Grumman, list goes on, McDonnell Douglas, and there's probably 30 or 40 others that I'm not mentioning, but they're out there. Their lobbyists are all in Congress, and this is why the Republicans and Democrats vote in lockstep, because each state has its own military base. It has the U.S. government has made sure that armaments are manufactured in each state of the union. So they can always say that jobs are involved and we need more jobs, so therefore we need to make more weapons. So instantly they have a cheerleading team of people that want to keep their job. And regardless of what goes on in the rest of the world, when we distribute these weapons in lots of wars around the world, the Ukraine is just one theater. We've been fighting liberation movements in South America for 60 or 70 years.
Well, and it looks like we're preparing another theater of war with China on the other side.
Yeah, that's craziness, because the Chinese don't quite understand why the Americans are like this. A lot of Chinese culture is highly influenced by Confucius, and Confucius' teachings do not condone war, and they encourage fellowship and cooperation. So, Tao Te Ching and Buddhism teach similar lessons to us. So the Chinese are a threat to the U.S. government only because U.S. corporations feel threatened by the power of their economy. They've almost caught up to the U.S. economy and GDP. And in fact, the truth is that American corporations relocated to China after 1994, when the North American Free Trade Act was created and the TPP was proposed, which would have opened a similar negotiation platform as NAFTA with China, Vietnam, Laos, the Koreas, Siberia. So those platforms really just allow U.S. corporations to relocate where the the wages are the lowest, and the lack of labor unions prevents activity that allows workers to want more benefits and medical care and all of the bennies that we have here in this country under union representation. So U.S. corporations, as much as they complain about the Chinese, wouldn't be making huge profits as they are now from their Chinese factories.
Mhm.
So, you know, this whole thing is totally ridiculous. We're dependent on the Chinese to make a lot of things in this country that we don't make anymore because we farmed it all out. COVID was a good example of that. 3M was the largest, N95 mask maker in the country. But when it came down to getting masks for the US population in the first round of COVID 3 years ago, there weren't enough masks in the US, and the Chinese had, because they were very concerned that COVID was going to spread throughout the country, their country of 1.5 billion people. So they more or less commandeered the 3M factories and said, you're going to make masks for us because we have a larger population and this is the epicenter of the infection. So consequently, 3M, they had to gear up to make masks again. They had to gear up to make the N95s here in this country. And it's so true of most of the other, mask production for surgical and, industrial use. So much of it's made in China. So we were very unprepared for COVID here. Because of that, we were hamstrung by the supply chain issues of having all of the manufacturing in China.
Well, with all that, yeah, and the thing is too, where we live in the Olympia, all this feels like it's happening so far away. What do you do other than, talk about it? But what you're engaged a lot.
So much of our culture here, we have some neoliberals in this town who are Democrats, what I like to say the corporate wing of the party, and they're not interested in campaign finance reform. They enjoy taking as much corporate money as they can to get reelected. And in fact, they've refused to follow our new campaign finance rules that was created by the Bernie wing of the Thurston County Democrats. There are $200 limits for corporations and friends or family of corporations. So the only people that were going through campaign services by the end of 2022 were the progressive candidates, the corporate candidates, who are the ones that got elected into the House and the Senate, the state legislature, totally disregarded campaign services because they didn't want to be held to the $200 limits. And when you look at the PDC reports of our 22nd District House members, there's lots of corporate money in there from builders associations, master builders, Chamber of Commerce. And on the other side of that is Jessica Bateman, who is our 22nd District House representative for the seat 1, I think. She's taken, I don't know, probably about $20,000 just from health insurance companies and Medicare Advantage companies, the big ones. So we know if you can follow the money in these candidates, when you start looking at the bills that are coming out of their conferences in their offices. And I wish we had trackers on the lobbyists so we could track the lobbyists as they're going into the congressional members' offices so we'd know who's there. But that information is possible to get it from the public disclosure, the PDC, but it's not easy if you don't know how to ask the right questions.
Well, and a lot of
So-
this is you really have to be paying attention, because if you're not, like you're looking at the war in Ukraine to even local politics, like you mentioned Jessica Bateman, on her page, she says she's an advocate, a housing advocate, and she just put a bill towards, for housing locally, turning that to what was it, nix the single housing, so any house within city limits throughout the state can be turned into fourplexes, which it all looks good. Looks like she's she's for the homeless and whatnot. What is, when you dig into it, what do you see? Like you said, she's
Well, I've had a lot of arguments with her and Lori Dolan about this issue. And also all the members of the city council know how the progressives feel about the current missing middle bill. They don't call it missing middle anymore. It's called housing options. So they gave it a friendly sounding name. It's just PR, but it's the same bill. So the problem is we've been housing advocates have been clamoring for a 20% build out of truly low income housing, like housing that someone on minimum wage can afford, which doesn't exist in this town. Basically, if you can find a place that you can live in for minimum wage, you're renting a small room in a house with lots of other people.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that scenario pans out. Probably the cheapest rents in town are in places like these new apartments that are up near Capital Medical Center, multi-care it's called now. But you have to have you have to be eligible for a housing subsidy. Some of it is housing and urban development money called Section 8, and there's not enough of that money really to go around. So they always talk about it being low income, but you have to be eligible for the grants in order to get it, and you have to know how to get them. And there's not enough money coming from the feds because we're spending it all on war. So how does that jive, So anyway, we've been clamoring for what they consider to be low income is some figures taken from Thurston County's median income 2021 or 2020. And they claim that the median income is $55,000. That means that half of the county is making, if you draw a line in the middle in numbers and you count all of the various income brackets from top to bottom, the middle is the median. So the median, they say, is $55,000. Well, that means that there's a lot of people making more than $55,000 in this county. And in the city of Olympia, from what I've seen, is the city of Olympia has a lot of more low-income people than the county. A lot of wealthy people have settled in the county, and they're not even in city limits. So that's why those median figures were taken from the county's polling census forms. So they want to make it look like they're actually building housing for the middle, which $55,000 a year is equal to a job that pays $27.50 an hour. And you're working 40 hours a week and 52 weeks a year to make that. What they don't count is all of the taxes, your FICA, your Social Security withholding, state and federal, local taxes. So by the time you get down to what $55,000 looks like, the rule is supposedly for housing advocates is you shouldn't be spending any more than 30% of your income on housing in order to feel comfortable, because you've got the rest of that 30 is the 60% remaining is your food, your healthcare, your your utilities, and the costs of sending your kids to school, and your transportation budget. So but ultimately, the way things are with inflation of rents, people are probably spending 50% or more of their income on rents just because of this, inflation. We've had in the last 4 years, we've had COVID beating people down, and we've had unregulated capitalism in the form of these private equity companies coming into the real estate market. They've been purchasing as many blocks of single family residences in this county as they can buy. And how they do it is they get the MLS, and they have a pocket full of cash. So they find out who the highest bidder is on a house and who has made an offer. Top dollar, say $25,000 above the $400,000 asking price, and they drop in another $50,000, and guess what? They always win the bid. So that housing is immediately taken out of the housing market. It's owned by private equity, and they can either rent it or flip it or just hold it empty. So this is what's happened to about a third of our housing stocks. About 30% in this country was sold to companies like BlackRock Investments, which is one of the largest private equity firms in the country. So we have all this housing that's not available anymore. They've also bought up apartment blocks too, and raised the rents. They bought I think one of the most egregious things that private equity has bought, the Carlyle Group bought Friendly Village next to Hagen's on the west side, that 55 and older mobile home park there. It's been there as long as I can remember, 45 years at least. So those people are retired. They're living on their Social Security. And the first thing that Carlyle Group did was raise the rent by a third on the lot where they're captive there because they can't find another place to move their mobile home. So Carlyle's just going to keep squeezing the rents there. And what people are doing in reaction is forming groups to make an offer to the seller, whoever owns it, and getting funds from startup groups like the Northwest Cooperative Housing Association can find grants to convert mobile home parks into cooperatives. But it takes it. The problem is you need a grant writer, and you need somebody that knows the housing market grants that are available, and you need organization. You need to have some agreements with the current renters and their ability to buy into the cooperatively owned mobile home park. With what their rents were, their rents would be now going into owning a share of that park. So they would become owners of their property. So there are some creative ways to deal with this, but it's private equity has such deep pockets that it's pretty hard. You have to have a sympathetic owner that says, okay, well, I could make another $500,000 if I sell it private equity, but On the other hand, I can give these people in my mobile home park a secure place to live into their retirement.
Yeah.
And, that I'll make a little bit, I won't make a killing, but, I'm doing the right thing for the community. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways of looking at things, and it just depends on the owner. It just depends on how greedy they are. Do they want to help the community, or do they want to fatten their pockets?
Mhm. Yeah, it takes it takes organizing, which in this day and age, maybe it's not so easy, but it's possible, I
It's
gather.
possible. It happens. Yeah, it's for sure. There was a few people working on this. Miles Nolan, I don't know him.
No.
He's currently doing graduate studies down in, I think, in Albuquerque right
Mhm.
now. But he was one of the ones who organized. He was working with a group, the Low Income Housing Association out of Seattle, and the Northwest Cooperative Housing Development Cooperatives.
Mhm.
So he was working with mobile home park residents, and they're mostly Hispanic over near Moses Lake, and they successfully turned 2 parks into renter occupied cooperatives.
Mhm.
So it's possible to do it,
Yeah.
and with the will of and some help from federal grants out there. So, if governments are serious, they put their money where their mouths are, and that's not where the current push in the legislature is headed. They talk a big talk, but they don't really have the funding. And so you can say a lot of feel good stuff about, oh yeah, we're building all these 4plexes and 6plexes on single family lots. Well, the dirty secret is they're all market rate. So whatever is built is going to go to the highest bidder, and
Mhm.
it's not going to be median income 55,000. It's going to be above that.
Mhm.
They're aiming for the $75,000 income bracket. The rents are going to be expensive in these 6plexes and 4plexes. They want to be renting to the upwardly mobile, for example, state workers in administrative positions.
Mhm.
And that's what's been happening with Walker John's apartments downtown. Like, for instance, Annie's Flats
Mhm.
has a lot of state workers that are not entry-level jobs that are living in those places. So, we're not, the city council is not serious enough to really create low-income housing without the help of the Low Income Housing Association in Seattle, and places like, they built uh, they built the new housing off of Patterson Street there, right near the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I think it was about 85 units there, and they were filled up. They were filled up before the place was even built.
Mhm.
It's because there's a long waiting list of people wanting Section 8 housing, assisted housing, because they can't afford to rent. So we can build a lot more of those types of buildings where we're actually building housing that is on sliding scale and affordable, where there's some rent control and kind of compassionate look at people's actual incomes and needs, instead of going for the big profit. So downtown, there's the Shag Apartments. I don't
Mhm.
know if you know where those are.
No.
They are the big building that's just north of Ziegler's Welding.
Yes. Okay. Mhm.
And there's 2 buildings there, I think.
Mhm.
But when they were built, I think it's probably like 15 years ago, the agreement with the city is that the housing in those 2 buildings would be affordable for people on Medicare and Medicaid and the elderly. So there's senior housing, but that senior housing now is sunsetting because it was like a limited time frame. So the owners of the building, and I don't know when exactly this is going to happen, but the owners of the building say that the rents are going up.
Mhm.
So as soon as that low income housing contract they signed ellipses, that housing is gone unless the city does something right away.
Well, and I like with so many of these issues, maybe someone listening to this podcast can start to feel down or depressed or hopeless. And you've been doing this for so long and been able to stay engaged. What would you say, or what has kept you going that wouldn't, you could tune out and it's too much, whether it's the war in Iraq or sorry, war in the Ukraine or any of these to the local issues. There's so many forces that really just feel relentless. Like you said, we got low income housing and now it's already set to go up. It's a relentless push. What has been your thoughts on that over the years?
Well, I mean, ultimately, when you look at the forces that drives the city council and the city manager of Olympia, those forces are mainly the Chamber of Commerce and the master builders. They usually have at least one member installed in the planning commission.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of go direct to conversation when there's zoning discussions and decisions to be made by the and then there's obviously the master plans. A lot of these plans are getting wiped out by all of this special legislation for the missing middle. So a lot of the comprehensive plans have been scrapped because of the push to build more housing that isn't affordable.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no mandate in any of this housing. There's only one building in town that was developed by Walker John, and it hasn't even been built yet. Right next to Dumpster Valley is the old Griswold office supply building that burnt down years ago. The city bought it from the owner from Griswold's for like $300,000 and then spent money to demolish it, what was left of it. There was no roof for many years. So the city spent money, they bought it, $300,000, then they spent money to demolish it. I don't know what that costs. They sold it twice to two different developers that said that they were going to put up apartments there, and it's a small space and they had height limits. And when they looked at the costs and the return on the rents for that site, they backed out of their contract. So the city was left holding the debt on this because they had weasel clauses built into their contracts in the city. So the city is holding on to this property that they really wanted to develop. And they offered it to Walker John for $50,000, taking a $250,000 hit on what they paid for it, and not even considering the demolition costs. So the agreement with Walker John is that he agreed to take the 12-year property tax exemption. He doesn't have to pay any property taxes on that site for 12 years. And in return, he builds 20% low-income housing. So, if he builds 10 apartments, he's got to build 2 that are affordable to the median income, 55,000. So the rest will be more expensive housing. So this is the only, Walker John kind of did, this is a carrot that the city offered him because they basically gave that property to him is worth much more than $50,000.
Mhm.
So, you know, ultimately the cash giveaways for the let's see, MFTE, it's called MFTE, it's multifamily tax exemption. So if you build housing downtown more than 4 units, you can get this tax exemption for 8 years without having to build anything affordable. You can build it all market rate. And that's the majority of the buildings that are going up downtown. None of them are affordable.
Mhm.
So the only building that was built affordable downtown was the Billy Frank building, and that filled up immediately too.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're not serious about creating truly low-income
What
housing.
has happened downtown? Because they cleared out the Deschutes area a year or so ago. They've cleared out a lot of the tents and everything everywhere. There definitely seems to be less homeless people around. But what happened to everybody?
Well, they've been moved around. A lot of the people moved up to the jungle, which is right across from the entrance to the hospital off of Martin Way.
Yeah, and all the RVs are gone now. They blocked that all off too. So
Well, the RVs have been moved around. If you go up to Lily Road and you see the fast fuel gas station there in between the freeway and Martin Way, there's a road that goes north or goes west towards the wetland, and it goes directly towards the jungle is right across the wetlands there. So the city has 5 acres there that they're planning to put ultimately they want to put low-income housing on it, but I think right now they're letting some of those RVs park there, and I'm not sure exactly how many. And they've got porta potties and portable showers thing. I haven't been to the site to know for sure if the city was talking about doing this. I'm only guessing. I have not looked into it, and the people that know are probably Tyler Gundell, and she works for Oli Map, which is the city's version of a low-income housing triage group. So there's 2 people that work for MAP, as far as I understand. And basically that evolved out of Just Housing, which was the low-income, they were doing a lot of good work the city wasn't doing. They were actually in the street helping people that were down and out and needed services and couldn't get them for one reason or another. Some of it's mental illness, some of it's drug addiction, some of it's just
what
chronic.
group is that?
That was Just Housing.
Just Housing, yeah.
So the city kind of defused Just Housing by offering Tyler Gundell and a couple of other of the activist jobs with the city to manage the homeless population and to help them with city dollars in that way. They're paying two salaries basically, so that Tyler and her coworker can pay rent in Olympia. So that's going on. But certainly it's not enough. I mean, there's still roving camps. There's camps all over the St. Martin's campus out Martin Way too. And there's still people camping on the road in between Boulevard and East Side Street, the little cutoff road that you can see the camps on the edge of the freeway there if you drive north towards Lacey. There's camps right near the jungle right across the road up on that hill next to the propane place and the animal control. So it's just right up the hill. There's woods up there, and there's more campers up there. So they're all over the place. and I don't even know where all the camps are. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Grass Lakes has camps.
Well,
And the
weren't they doing hotel rooms too? Putting people in hotel rooms for a while?
yeah, but that's a really temporary thing. When it
Yeah.
gets really, really cold, the city doles out some money for renting an old motel and putting people up for a few weeks till the weather warms. So there is a bit of compassion going on there.
So people
But
that care about all this stuff and are feeling that like they wish that there was some change happening, what do you suggest? Or what should they be meeting regularly, or get together and just start figuring things out? Or
well, there are groups that are working on this, like Power does a lot of good work with needy families, mostly, single mothers. And you know, there are good people out there helping with all of this. And I think one of the groups that was really doing good work was the ho hobos that were selling wreaths. This guy Spencer was kind of organizing it all, and he put people to work making Christmas wreaths and selling them. They were selling them in Walker John's space down there right by Dumpster Values, and they made quite a bit of money. And the Olympia's houseless people had incomes for a while. So that's just around Christmas. And anyway, Spencer has left town now. He's headed south. And he said he'll probably come back to Olympia, but he's been here every winter helping with the houseless population for the last 4 or 5 years. So he's not getting paid for that. So he just wants to do the right thing.
what do you have on your calendar these days? What are you up to these days? You have your radio show?
Yeah, I'm doing my radio show mostly, and working on cars. I'm still a mechanic. I do repairs of all kinds, and fix electric cars and hybrids. I work on a lot of Toyota Priuses and Subarus, but there's a million things to do. There's lots of gardening that goes on in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I help my daughter with her 3 gardens that she has going on. We haul about 12 yards of manure and shovel it all out by hand into the gardens, and I till it all up for her, run the tractors, and build the fences for her. So
Nice.
So we're doing a lot of gardening too in the summer. There's doing tree nursery too. I have lots of chestnut trees, so in pots. They all need to be repotted right now. And I'd like to play more music with my friends, but the last 3 years I haven't been doing much of that because of COVID. My social life is very limited right now, and I don't go downtown. I don't go to bars. I don't go to restaurants. I wear a mask when I'm in town. So that's about it. My guest this last Tuesday was Marisha Auerbach, who does the Fertile Ground gardening. She does a Zoom education. She works for the University of Oregon, OSU Extension, when she's in Portland, and up here she has this online gardening thing that's starting on the 1st and goes until November 1st. So anyway, so we interviewed Marisha, and up next is Paul Cienfuegos, who's written a lot of books on community rights, and he's got a new book out, and so we're going to talk about his book, and that's going to be on the 31st, and it will air on the 9th. So
was he just in town promoting his book, or
he was at Browsers
yes
last week, and he was at Traditions in I think in December. So So he lives in Portland, so he gets around. He's a pretty great activist, community rights organizing, environmentalist, and so beyond that, I haven't figured my guest slots out, and my program airs every Thursday at noon on KAOS. It has for 21 years. So,
Excellent.
Yeah, it looks like kind of running out of time for an hour.
Yeah, thank you for your time. That was a
Yeah.
nice little conversation. We meandered
Well,
through a
it was
bunch of stuff.
mostly me talking, and that's not very exciting. I like to make things more conversational.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
you had a lot to tell.
yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and we just barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's so many things we didn't get into climate change or
Oh yeah,
or even the
yeah.
economy. We really didn't touch that.
We didn't touch the economy. No,
No.
That's another huge story.
Yeah.
And I'm really into natural history and botany too. So
Yeah.
I watch a lot of botany programming. So that's one of my big interests.
Yeah, you're saying you have a big interest in agriculture and
Yeah, I was at Evergreen in the 80s in the sustainable agriculture program. So
Mhm.
so that's actually one of my things that I do as a hobby. And I used to sell a lot of nursery stock too, mostly nut trees, walnuts and chestnuts. I still have quite a few chestnuts growing.
There's that organization that does the free chestnut trees, or someone. Have you seen that?
I think I have seen that. They're trying to reintroduce the American chestnut hybrids into the country. They say that they have a blight resistant American chestnut. I think this is the push anyway. But the gene that carries the resistance for this blight, it used to be called Endothica parasitica. That's the old name, but there's a new name. But it can't survive in the Northwest because it needs warm nighttime temperatures, like the East Coast. If you've ever been in like Baltimore in the summer, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't cool down. It's like so hot and muggy all night long. And a lot of funguses and mushrooms, mycorrhizae, have evolved on the East Coast and in other temperate regions of the world that enjoy those high humidity and high temperature nights. So the chestnut fungus can't live here. So we can grow American chestnuts here. In fact, there's some large ones in Tumwater. And we can grow the Europeans, which are not resistant to the blight here. So most of my trees are European trees.
I thought of a nice project one time. Did a little bit of work on it. Was almost mapping all the fruit trees and nut trees in the city, and going around with the volunteers and take care of them all, get them healthy and strong, and get people to grow more varieties of fruit trees in the area. There's not a lot of varieties, and then just have a huge harvest and give away all the fruit and nuts for free.
Yeah, that's the gleaners.
Gleaning, yeah.
You get the fruit and vegetables and nuts that no one is harvesting. They're just falling on the ground. A lot of people don't take care of the trees.
Yeah, and if you prune them and took care of them in 2-3 years, you'd have these massive harvest. Because a lot of them are just in discare, so
they're right. They're pretty wild looking.
Yeah,
it looks like a lot of my orchard is really wild looking too.
Yeah,
because I kind of live and let live sort of thing.
Yeah,
going on, but the other thing that I do is I'm in the steering committee of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which is kind of the oldest peace group in the country. So Martin Luther King was a member of that group as well. So,
What's that group doing now? What's their plan?
it's pretty, we just have peace vigils, and we do a holiday vigil in December every year.
Is that the Friday? Is that the group that does the Friday down by the?
No, well, that is completely separate. That is a peace vigil tool, and a lot of the members of Fellowship of Reconciliation and Veterans for Peace are there. The Women in Black are there, and everybody else in town who cares about peaceful outcomes and ending wars shows up there on Friday too. I haven't had a lot of time to do it, but I in past years I've spent a lot of time there.
The idea I had is we all go to Marilyn Strickland's office in Lacey and ask her why she's not anti-war and get it on film. Just press her on a regular basis.
Well, what her problem is that she's so corporate that she was mayor of Tacoma for several years.
Yeah.
She allowed Puget Sound Energy to build that giant natural gas storage cylinder that's millions of gallons of gas, and it's refrigerated.
Yeah, the liquefied natural gas.
It's cooled with liquid nitrogen and compressors, so super cold, like way below zero, 50 below zero, whatever it is. It's a ridiculous coldness that gas has to be held in order to keep it liquid. So at any rate, she allowed it to be built. She was the lead agency. Normally it's the state energy siting committee that decides these sorts of things. Well, PSC knew that there would be trouble in getting permission from the state, from the governor's commission on energy siting. So they went through Maryland because they knew that she was going to say yes to everything. She was later chair of the Pierce County Chamber of Commerce, and then as she left her mayorship, she was hired as King County's chair of the Chamber of Commerce up there, and then her next step was to be elected to the 10th district when Denny Heck left.
She's on the Armed Services Committee, I believe, too.
That's quite possible because she has Fort Lewis and McCord Air Force Base and Bremerton in her 10th district, I believe, as her constituents. So and up north in Seattle,
one of the first Korean Americans, at least in Washington State, to be elected, which is wonderful. But I would love to see her stance of what she thinks of of the U.S. and South Korea doing war games off the coast of North Korea, provoking North Korea.
Well, that would be interesting to get her on the record about that. Well, mostly it's about for the U.S. They claim that they want Taiwan to have self-determination.
Yeah.
Well, the Chinese are saying that that's a non-starter because Taiwan is where Chiang Kai-shek left after the nationalistic army of China was defeated by Mao Zedong's forces. Yeah. So
which is that didn't they at one point Mao aligned with them to defeat the emperor, and then they kicked him off to Taiwan, something like that.
Yeah, it was a carrot and stick thing where Mao says, okay, we'll let you have Taiwan, but just know that you're still part of China.
Yeah, that's all still part of China, but
it's all still part of China.
It's sort of the same thing that's happened. We did what's going on in the Ukraine. We set the stage, and then when poking the bear, and then now we're poking the dragon. Poking the dragon.
Yeah, that would be more appropriate. But it's foolish to start a war with China because, like I said, our supply chains for so much of it that gets used in this country are made in China. And I'm not talking about cheap Chinese goods. I'm not talking about dollar store. I'm talking about electronics.
Yeah.
Motherboards, chips, most of our cell phones
Mhm.
and computers are made in China. They're made in Foxconn. All of the Apple products are made in Foxconn in China. So,
What percentage of what do you think Wall Street? How much of it is really propped up by the war and by the military-industrial complex? It seems like, is that a driving force? That's why we're doing all this. Like,
yeah, it's the military-industrial complex.
I mean, as long as they're making profits, Wall Street's making profits, and our economy's artificially propped up, or maybe I don't know if that's a real thing, but
Sure, it's a real thing. It's obvious. It all comes down to the lobbyists and the re-election money that's given to candidates. When they're up for election, they can count on, huge donations from the military. An interesting factoid is Lloyd Austin, who is our Pentagon chief, had to get a special dispensation to be allowed to serve as the Pentagon's chief by President Biden, because he was only retired like 3 years ago, and you're supposed to have 7 years or something before you can serve in that position when you were enlisted, if you were a general or an admiral or whatever. So he was given special treatment in order for him to take that post. And he's also serves on the board of Raytheon.
Mhm.
So he had to give up his position on the board with Raytheon, but in effect, he's a de facto member of the board of Raytheon by being the head of the Pentagon.
Well, can members of Congress actually own stock in?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
You can literally
they-
own stock and help them make more
and
profit.
vote for war. And
Yeah.
vote for war. Yeah.
What's the book? War is a Racket. That's it.
Yeah. Is that Schmedley? I forget what his name is, but yeah. At any rate, war is a racket. It really is. And the other kind of evil thing that goes on right now is our Secretary of State was working for this outfit called Pine Island Associates. And he and actually the former who was the former spokesperson for the president, the gal,
the most recent woman that was is she redhead? I think.
Yeah, she's redhead.
Yeah.
Anyway, she worked with the Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
And this Pine Island Associates is basically a one-stop shop for arms sales. So the Pentagon would go there to Pine Island, and the arms dealers would come in and they would have meetings there. The Defense Appropriation Committee members would come there and they would have these three-way meetings over at Pine Island to decide which weapons were going to be asked for by Congress. And so with people in the Secretary of State's position like that, you can't really say that there's any amount of peace negotiations at all, because ultimately there's plenty of good money to be made supplying the army with the tools of the trade, to steal a phrase from an old anti-war song. So I'm looking for Biden Secretary of State. It's just right on the tip of my tongue. Sorry about that.
That's all right. But yeah, it's a lot of corruption, a lot of nasty things are happening for the almighty dollar.
It's Antony Blinken is his name.
Oh, Anthony. Yeah, Blinken. Yes, okay.
So
He was the
look
one
up.
that said when the Nord Stream pipeline that it was a great opportunity.
Oh, right. Yeah, it was a great
Yeah.
opportunity because now the cost of liquefied natural gas has gone up incredibly. And the US fracking companies are now shipping lots of containerized, pressurized cargo over to Europe. And the
Yeah.
Europeans are suffering because
Will that
uh,
will the Tacoma will that be the oil or the gas there be going to Europe? I don't know.
no, it's too far away.
Yeah, I think so.
No, it's all East Coast fracking.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pennsylvania.
Where's that liquefied natural gas going from here, do you think?
To the Pacific Rim.
Oh.
They claim that it was built for the tote barge system that takes supplies up to Southeast Alaska into Anchorage, and they made these clean burning natural gas engines. They converted the diesel engines to run on natural gas. So that supposedly was, that was the fake reason. But ultimately, we're all paying for it in our electricity bills now because they got permission from the Utilities and Transportation Commission to up the rates for both gas and electric to help pay for that storage facility, which is really an export facility. It's a deep water port, and they can ship liquefied natural gas to the Pacific Rim, to China, wherever, Vietnam, Japan, you name it. So that's TransAlta. TransAlta is a partner in the ownership of PSE.
Okay.
And they have fracking wells and interests in the tar sands. And their gas line comes down through Sumas to one of PSE's natural gas power plants. There it makes electricity for Whatcom County and puts it in the grid there. So the pipeline comes down into King County and goes south towards Portland. So that is all BC natural gas that they're putting in that storage facility. So it's making a lot of BC oil companies happy. So what's not to like?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, I mean, there's no love lost between me and PSC because we had a public power campaign going on in 2012 that we won 42% of the vote in Thurston County to take over PSC's asset and form a public utility cooperative. And we actually won in the city of Olympia. It was like 51%. It was almost a tie. But in the county was because PSC had spent like over $1 million for ads to try to kill the public power campaign. We really didn't have a chance. We had like $38,000 worth of small donations. So it was a valiant effort.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about PSC.
Is that campaign going to restart up?
Well, we were going to start it up just as COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
We were organizing in November of the year before COVID hit, 2021 or 2020 actually it was. Yeah, we were going for it, and both a county and a city initiative. All the initiative sheets were printed up, and as soon as we figured out that we could not go around door to door getting signatures, the campaign was over. I mean, we couldn't do it. So PSE was happy.
Yeah. That's sort of what happened with Bernie's campaign. But he won Nevada and then COVID hit.
Yeah, it didn't help that the the DCC, which is the Democratic Committee to elect congressional winners, basically, with corporate money. They've been fighting back progressive candidates in almost every election.
Mhm.
So when the DNC says, send me money, don't.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they're not electing progressives. They pushed out a bunch of really great progressives in Texas, at least two that I know of, could have been elected had they not put their thumbs on the scales.
Well, what do you think of the so-called progressives in Congress right now? Are they? What's your thoughts on how they're doing?
I think they've kind of rolled over to the war, that's for sure. I think Pramila Jayapal has introduced a lot of great legislation, but most of it's been shelved and hasn't made it out of committee because there isn't a strong enough support within the Democratic Party, because too many of the progressive ideas are opposed by the corporate backers of many of these candidates who are in controlling positions and chairing positions in the House and the Senate. So the money controls what leaves the committees. So some of the stuff just never makes it onto the floor of the House or the Senate to be voted on. And this year, we have a do-nothing Congress, just like we had with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema vetoing anything that Democrats wanted to do. Now we've got the House in the hands of ultra-right Trump supporters, and
We have Patty Murray. Patty Murray's the the now fourth in line to be president.
Yeah, right.
Third in line, something like that.
Patty
President pro
Murray's,
tempore.
she's in the Senate.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Senate is firmly in control of the Democrats this year because they elected some Democratic senators. But the House makes legislation. The Senate debates it and does their bill research, and then it goes on to the president for signing. So if the legislation coming out of the House is too obnoxious, the Senate's going to kill it. So that's why I say it's going to be a do-nothing Congress.
Well, what's the answer? Just organize, 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 or?
I don't know what the answer is. President Biden could lead with presidential edicts on a lot of things, but they can be
for everyday
they can
people.
Be.
What's the answer for us? What do we do?
Well, today, what was on my program today was Jeff Sowers, the former chair of the Democratic Party here, and they formed the South Salish Sea, a progressive organization, and they're having regular meetings now. So it's kind of an alternative to the Democratic Socialists, who also have meetings in Olympia. Bernie was a Democratic Socialist, so.
Is that the only organizations really out there that you know of that are doing things?
Oh, I think there's other organizations. I think the Thurston County Climate Action Team is actually a pretty good organization, and they're doing work for the climate. But other than the South Salish Sea Progressives organization and the Democratic Socialists, there are half of the Thurston County Democratic Party is a progressive wing. So we introduce bylaws into as the current operating documents for the party, but the corporate side of the party just thumbs their nose at reforms, and they want to keep working with corporate power and corporate money. So it's a little bit discouraging when you see that corporate wing always gets elected because they have more money to spend.
Yeah.
And, we really need to get rid of Citizens United, is
Yeah.
ultimately on the national level.
Yeah.
And to reform campaign finance spending. And people have been saying that for years, so it just feels like a broken record.
Yeah.
Because there's no action in Congress because too many of congressional members are beholden to corporate money, and they always get elected because of
Well,
it.
maybe time for everyday people to raise a ruckus, I guess.
That's right. Yeah,
time for us to raise a ruckus, as AOC used to say.
Yeah,
and get out there and get
right.
active, do something,
Right.
anything.
Yeah, I think the squad is actually, I think they're actually have their hearts in the right places. It's just, they're being held back by the corporate members of Congress. It's kind of like, it's just like, once when I asked Clark Gilman, the city council pro tem for Olympia, why I was voting for all these tax breaks for all the downtown housing for the millionaires, and he said, well, if I don't vote for these tax exemptions, then we won't get any housing built, and I will lose my position on the land use committee. So they have these ways of punishing. The chamber has these ways of punishing members of the Olympia City Council by removing them from committees that decide about land use. I mean,
But Renata Rollins was a great case. Actually, she was a really sweet, wonderful person, and she just seemed to didn't really got gobbled up by the system. Is my observation.
That's exactly what happened, and I think she had a case of burnout by the time she left. She was hearing about it from all of the progressive radicals in town about why can't you do more, and why aren't you being a stronger advocate for low-income housing? She got all those questions, and I think it's fair that she was pressed upon those issues because she was voting with the corporate members of the council to give away more money to the Chamber of Commerce supported builders and the private equity people in town who are putting up the money for these expensive buildings. So, it's just it's money corrupts ultimately. And that's what's happened to our so-called democracy. It's not really I wouldn't say it's a democracy at all anymore. It's more of a republic, and real democracy has yet to be enacted. About the best thing.
We have the power in ourselves. That's a piece. We have to rise up.
That's right.
Within us. Do we consent or don't consent? The power of the majority just takes people get together, have a breakfast, and chit chat and make some plans and form a group and stand up.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you've got to work together to and organize and find affinity groups. Like a really good affinity group is Oli Ecosystems. They've been saving a lot of land for nature and finding grants. Big kudos to Daniel Einstein and all the volunteers that are planting trees over there on Cooper Point Road for that terrible mistake that happened because the city was asleep at the wheel and DNR was asleep at the wheel and allowed those people to log that area. So, there's lots of great groups that are doing good things in town, and but they're kind of unsung heroes, But if we get together and help each other, perhaps we can turn it around on a micro scale, if not a macro scale. It's like we'll get a little done at least. Got to do something.
Or it feels good to be on the right side at least.
Exactly. We'll I'm sure we've got to make a splash somehow and raise people's awareness about the environment, climate, making peace, and affordable housing for everyone, not just
Yeah.
for the median income 55,000.
Well, I think a lot of people have some level of awareness. They often just feel disempowered, disillusioned, and it's hard not
Right.
to. It feels overwhelming, and I think
Yeah.
coming together and creating community and creating, uh, synergy together, if you're creating that, that just bringing together people and being with like-minded people and making little dents in what we could do is the kind of the answer. I think it makes you feel hopeful, or at least
Yeah.
feels good. Chris Hedges said something like that. He's a pretty he doesn't have a lot of hope in the future, Chris Hedges, but
No.
he said that he his what made him feel, I don't know what it was, good or something, is that just being on the right side of history, and being with people that stand with you, um, it feels hopeful. That's the hope he had, was when he kind of told the story about rallying and doing the anti-war and knew that they were going to lose, but just being there with other people that believed like he believed gave him hope, even though it was for naught. But I kind of see
Yeah.
that. I felt that way when I gone to rallies and see, oh, look at all these people. We all believe in the same thing. We all know this is wrong. It feels good.
Oh, right. I mean, I think that's absolutely right. We've got to organize and make it happen. Rally around a cause and make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Because they're sure not listening unless you make a lot of noise. And what usually happens if you're the only voice is you get pushed out of the inner circle of decision makers.
Yeah.
Because you're not bowing down to corporate interests. It's like, it's
But
like
it creates something. I mean, Bernie was he the only? He's really was the only politician there, but he stuck his neck out and created a whole movement that, I mean, however you want to say it ended up, he still galvanized a lot of people.
Yeah, he did. And he's still my hero, even though he's kind of, he's probably not running again. I mean,
Yeah.
but we need to find somebody else who has the charisma and the drive and honesty that can do a job that Bernie would have done if he had been elected. So I should probably go.
Yep. Thanks for your
being
time.
called off.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam, and keep up the good work with your podcast.
Maybe we'll see you at some meeting somewhere, rallying for some good cause.
I'm probably
or on a Zoom.
On a Zoom somewhere, but
yeah. Take care of your health.
Yeah, you can definitely ask me again.
Okay.
For if you want to do kind of updates on what's going on. But,
yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Hey, have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks, Adam.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.